welcome back. And this is the last part for the formulas with the additional knowledge that I think you'll really find interesting and useful. And I'll turn that over to you.
Okay, so this time we're going to be looking at a little more data analysis, and it's going to be things that you just want to know about your kids and your program. For example, you could look at your kiddos who are age 0 to 5, and you could divide it out between how many girls you have versus how many boys you have, or any other kind of information, like how many kids from a certain age come from a certain community, anything like that. So anything you can think of, really, Excel can do with these formulas.
So it's like taking data from two columns? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, exactly. Two factors.
Okay.
So it could be like age and gender, gender and allegation, community, anything, type of placement, whatever you need to know about, your population. That's what Excel can show you if you know how to ask it.
That's great.
Secrets. You can get the secrets out.
That's right.
Sounds good. I'm ready to go.
Hello, this is Marnina Evans with the Capacity Building Center for Tribes, and we are back one more time to talk about formulas. So now we're going to look at slightly more complex formulas. They're not really more complex. They're just looking at more than one piece of information at a time. So as you recall from our last video, hopefully, we can use the COUNTIF function to look in, let's see, so COUNTIF to look in any of our worksheets, worksheet name, and then the range of cells for cells meeting a criteria. So in this case, FIS for physical neglect. So what if we want to look at more than one criteria at once? For example, if we go down here, we could see that the person using this worksheet would like to know some information about the age and gender of the kids who have reports come in. So we want to look at range 0 to 5, age 6 to 10, age 11 to 15, and then age 16 to 18, and how many male, how many female, how many boys and girls for each age range. Okay, so Excel can do this, no problem at all, but you need to be able to tell it how to look for two pieces of information and then only give you the count for entries that meet, cases that meet both of those criteria. So we're going to look for, here we're going to look for boys who are age 0 to 5. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, first, let's see where that information lives in our spreadsheet. So let's go over to our January spreadsheet, Jan 2018. And this time, we are going to look at these two columns, age and gender. So we see age is in column E, and gender is in column F. Okay, and that's going to be consistent through all of our spreadsheets. Okay, so we can go back and for January, and here I should have followed my own advice from earlier and frozen this so that we can see when we scroll down. Let's go ahead and freeze the top row by going to View, Freeze Panes, and then Freeze Top Row. Okay, great. So that keeps the month up top so that we can still know where we are. Okay. So once again, like with all formulas, we start off with an equal sign to tell Excel to pay attention because we want it to go do something for us. Okay, so are we going to use the COUNTIF formula again because we want it to count something? Sort of. Excel needs a little bit of a heads up that what you want it to do is look for more than one thing. So COUNTIF, COUNTIFs. Okay, so they were basically just making it a plural. It doesn't make grammatical sense. Don't worry about that. But count ifs is how you tell it that you're going to want it to look for 2 sets of criteria. Okay, so once again, we're going to need to put the range and criteria into parentheses, just like usual. So we are going to say that we want it to look in January 2018, so Jan 2018. Don't forget these single quote marks on both ends around the sheet name, and then a little exclamation point, and then the cell range. So we said that, well, let's see, we'll start with age. So we said that that was column E. So we'll say E2 through E500. And like we mentioned in the last video, this range could be whatever you want it to be. You should definitely start with E2 because that's where your actual data is going to start underneath the header row. But you could go as far down as you want. You know, every tribe, every program gets different numbers of reports. So if you are a program that's getting more than 500 reports a month, well, honestly, you probably want to get a data system. But you can expand that to be, you know, go down to E1000, E2000, whatever you want it to be. We'll stick with E500 for right now because I know there are not more than 500 entries in there. Okay, so we have that. So now we're going to put our criteria. So in this case, it's going to be age, and it's going to be a number. So how do we tell Excel that we want age 0 to 5? Well, we can't put in, I mean, I guess we could make it look individually for age 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but it's going to be a lot easier to tell it just to look for something that is less than 6. So any child who is under 6, which means 0 through 5, we want them to count. Okay, so we're going to close the quote marks there on our criteria. Okay, so now how do we put the second bit of criteria? Well, we're going to separate that with a nice little comma, and you can tell as soon as I put the comma in, it gives you a little formula for how you're going to put in the second one. So it's just the same as the first. We still want it to look in Jan 2018. Whoops, I forgot my space there. 2018. Close that. Close those individual single quote marks. Going to have our exclamation point, and then we want our cell range. Okay, so we don't want it looking in E2 through E500 again because that's age. So we remember that gender was in column F. So we're going to say F2 through F500. Those are the cells that we want it to look at to find out how many of these kids are boys. So in this sheet, to say gender, we use male or female. So I'm going to have in quotation marks anything that is male, and then close those parentheses. Okay, let's review, make sure this all looks good. So we have, okay, go look at January 2018 and cells E2 through E500. And Excel is going to count anything, any number that is less than 6. So any kid that is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 will be counted, and nobody over that. Okay, and then it's also going to look for how many of these kids who are under 6 are also male. So January 2018, good. F2 through F500, because that's where the gender is. And we want it to look for male children. Okay, let's see if this works. Hit the tab key. All right, 9 kids. We have 9 boys who are age 0 to 5. Whew. Okay, so that seemed like a lot of work, but it really, it really is not any more complicated than what we were doing up here. You're just adding a second set of criteria. And just like we did in the last video, we can copy, whoops, sorry about that, go back to home. So we can copy this formula, hit tab, and let's do it this way, paste that in. Now it's the same number because it's still counting January, but what we can do, we're just going to cheat a little bit here to make our lives easier, because I don't want to sit and type all these formulas over and over and over again. That is really a waste of time and very tedious, and you'll make more mistakes that way. But you could just change both of the Jan 2018s to Feb 2018 to tell it to look in the February, our nice little February tab here. And all the other information is the same, because we have all the same columns and same headers throughout our workbook. Okay, so hit, and we see we had in February 10 boys who were age 0 to 5. Okay, pretty cool. And we could do the same. Remember, always hit tab when you're trying to do this. Don't try to click with your mouse on the new cell, or Excel will be very unhappy. And we could just change the February here to March. And we see that we had 7 little boy kiddos who were age 0 to 5 in March. And just like we did up here, we can use the AutoSum function to add these up and say that we had 26 for the entire quarter here. Okay, so that's the basics. And let's see, well, we're also going to want to do this for the girls. So again, we can cheat a little bit here. Copy, hit enter to go down 1. And then I'm going to paste that formula. Okay, so we see that we do still want it to be January. Look at January. It's going to be the same age range because we still want the kiddos who are under 6. And then all we really want to change is male to female. Okay. And we see that we had 11 girls in January who are aged 0 to 5. It's probably easier to do it like this, so we can take the February formula, paste that in, and do the exact same thing, just change male to female. We had 11 girls there too. Yep, that was February, good, good. And then we could do that with March. Paste that into the formula bar. So everything March, under 6, March. But we want to look for girls instead of boys. We just changed that. And we had 8 girls, 0 to 5 in March. And then we go and we do our auto sum. So we see there's a sum, the sum function, and the cell range is F21 through H21. We see yes, that's exactly what we want to add. Hit tab, and there was a total of 30 girls, 0 to 5 in the second quarter. Okay, so hopefully that is pretty straightforward. And again, you could do this with any criteria. You could do it with 3 pieces of information, 4, however many you want. You could look at, how many of these boys aged 0 to 5 had a neglect allegation. How many of them had siblings or were recurring cases. You could break out this data any way that you want to. All you have to do is give Excel the right criteria to go find you the information that you want to be able to see. And everything just follows the same formula. Okay, so hopefully that is pretty easy and understandable. And again, we have a nice cheat sheet reference guide that is available on the Tribal Information Exchange, and we'll give you the formulas that you can walk through. And if you have any specific questions or want some additional assistance, you can feel free to email us at any time at the email address you see on the screen. Thank you so much for your time, and hope this was helpful.
Okay, so that looked complicated, but ultimately it's not that bad. Can you guys think of anything else that you might want to, any other kind of things you might want to look at using these kind of formulas?
I can think of with ICWA that tribes might need to know where their children are in what cities, and how many in Seattle, how many in Los Angeles, how many in Minneapolis, and be able to track those children and their conditions, their situations, particularly if tribes choose not to take jurisdiction. Their children are still out there in the jurisdiction of other states and tribes, cities, but knowing where they are, whether it's on or off reservation, this would be a great tool.
I was thinking also you might want to know which ones are with relative placements and which ones are in daycare, or really breaking it down to where the kids actually, they're in care, but where are they in care? And that would be really useful.
It would. Okay, and hopefully you are all thinking of some great things that you want to look at in your data.
I did want to say one thing, Marnie. I think this is one of those, after doing the 3 about formulas, it would be great to just tell the folks again, our support email address, just if they have little questions, because you helped me, and it was a sign issue, in the formula, just changing a sign, or you put the wrong cell, and, to refer to, so I think this would be a great time to just say that one more time.
That is true. So anytime, any place, you can email us and we'll get back to you as soon as possible, and you'll see that email address on the screen.
All right, we're ready to go to the next series.